Welcome to Talent X,
the Talent Experience podcast featuring authentic conversations on the future of work.
empowering you to better understand and deliver a best-in-class, future-proofed career experience.
For more insightful conversations, visit talentxpodcast.com.
We hope you enjoy this episode of the Talent X podcast.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's truly an international time in our lives right now. It's Rhonda Taylor with Talent X. And today I have the unique opportunity of having a lifelong analyst friend joining us today. And it's William Tincup. William, introduce yourself.
Well, Rhonda, I am a Virgo. Favorite color is turquoise. Just kidding. I've been studying HR tech about as long as you have, and I think we both love both HR and recruiting and technology. And so I've studied it in a couple different ways, as a market researcher, as a consultant, owning an agency, and with RecruitingDaily, more on the talent acquisition side from a media perspective. But I just, my week, I think it's always interesting to kind of dig into how people use their time. So my weeks are kind of evenly divided between talking to practitioners, HR and TA, about how to use technology. And then the other half is talking to technology companies about how to get, practitioners to become aware of them. And I enjoy both conversations. They're vastly different, but I enjoy both conversations.
You're being very humble, William. I can remember when HR Tech, and I knew who you were, but I did not know the power and how well you were known within the HR Tech community. It was at HR Tech, and you came walking down the aisle, and there must have been like 15 to 20 people walking right behind you, and they were all just yipping at you, asking questions. And like I looked at somebody, I says, "Who's that?" And they said, "That's William Tincup."
Well, some of that I did. And this is a fun bit. I did tours there for a couple of years. As I would take practitioners, mostly, I would take them on tours of HR Tech. So we would walk down the middle of aisles and just look left and right, and I'd say, "Okay, this is a payroll processing company. This is a benefits management company. This is an internal mobility company, and this is what they do." Because most practitioners are so busy, they got their heads down. They can't keep up with what we keep up with. They can't keep up with all the kind of the improvements and innovations and how people are using things. And so that was actually a fun bit for me to do for a while. It's not easy because the questions would come out of all kinds of different perspectives, but I appreciate it. It was a fun bit, I do miss kind of being the COVID. I mean, we've had an HR Tech, but it wasn't the same, right? Is the virtual experience, and we've been doing RecruitingDaily. We've been doing virtual training events since February, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
I mean, it's nothing that kind of still, going and having a cup of coffee with somebody and looking them in the eye and just going, "Hey, what's going on? How are you doing?"
Yeah. And all the hugs that we used to get out
Right.
out in the floor, you really realize how much you miss the human contact.
There's some things with COVID that there are some silver linings. It has sped up some things, right? So it's sped up like video interviewing. It's sped up, candidates adopting video, etc. Like it's sped up some things like empathy. Like look at the three of us. We've got, our backgrounds. There's kids screaming, dogs barking, and I think my dishwasher's running. But that's normal, and it's okay. And we start off calls. How are you doing? How's everything going? How's your family? How are your kids? And we end calls with, wash your hands, wear a mask, stay safe, whatever. And I like that. I wasn't like that. I would tell you, December of 19, a year later, I was very much, when I get on business calls, it's business. We get to the business, like, what's the agenda? And I think COVID has helped me slow down and be more empathetic of people's situation. And I hope we don't lose that post COVID. If we can imagine a world where there is a post COVID, I hope we don't lose that empathy.
That's right. The caring and realizing that we all have families and additional stresses that we're
That's right.
dealing with on a regular day. We all can't be in our happy place all the time.
Well, we've talked for a while about bringing your whole self to work, and we've talked about this concept of work-life balance. And I think work-life balance was a myth, and I think COVID destroyed it. And I think once we come out the other side of this, I think it's more work-life integration,
Yeah.
where we think about, hey, listen, it's okay. You're going to have bad days. You're going to have good days. You're going to have days where you need to take a nap or go to the museum or whatever. There's going to be times where you're more productive or less productive, and that's okay. And whereas before we tried to wall off, like, oh, that's work, and then you won't do
Mhm.
work, and then, oh, that's home, and we wouldn't do. I think COVID's blown all that stuff up and shown that for kind of the fraud that it was. You're going to do work when you feel like you can be productive, and in your well-being, you're going to take time off and do things to make yourself not get burnt out.
Yeah.
And those are situational, and so they're not as rigid. I think that's going to be really kind of a really interesting flexibility that comes to bear with employers and employees, is just a more flexibility of an understanding of, hey, listen, outcomes have to be achieved. Check. Now, how do those outcomes need to be achieved? Now that there's all kinds of flexible things that we can do there. We can look at flexible work arrangements. We can look at remote work. We can look at gig workers. We can look at all these new things and say, well, the outcomes are the outcomes. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about that choice, that flexibility. I'm excited of how companies and employees and candidates and recruiters, how they start thinking of how that flexibility works.
Yeah. And I've always lived by life is work and work is life.
Yeah,
And to draw the line between the two of them,
yeah,
it's impossible. It's
yeah.
impossible, but it's up to you as an individual to make sure that you have a work-life balance.
That's right. You essentially, if it's almost like you being in tune with your own body or your own mind, and understanding, I need a break. I need a break. And it could be at 9 o'clock in the morning. Like that's the thing
Mhm.
that we gotta kind of get mentally over. It's like, I got up, got the kids out to school, had breakfast, had a call, train wreck. I need a break, right? And
Mhm.
before, we would have this rigid idea of like, well, no, from 8 to 5, you've got to be productive, productive in this time period. It's like, no. And I think COVID taught us that. It taught us that a lot of these jobs that we thought we couldn't do remotely, we were forced to do them remotely. And so that sped that up, which was nice. But it also sped up the idea of like, productivity is it becomes kind of a game of understanding yourself and understanding the way that outcomes need to be delivered, value needs to be delivered to the firm, and less discussion of how the work gets done. So I think actually micromanagers are probably the biggest victims of COVID. Those are the folks that feel like they have to stand on top of you to get the work done. I think those folks are really suffering.
Yeah. Yep. And they're the ones that are not having a productive workforce
Nope.
working under them.
Mm-mm. No,
Yeah.
no, and you know what? And not a happy, productive, happiness, and engaged and all that other stuff side of this is satisfied work. people have so many stresses. Like, we don't know right now the full extent of the emotional toll that COVID has placed in our laps. We have no idea. And I won't say PTSD, that's because there's an official definition of that, but like, we don't fully understand how crippling this has been. We're in it, right? And so we don't really know. Years from now, we will know. We'll like, oh my God,
Yeah.
can't remember. So, but I think, on some level, I think it's a tell. If you have to have your people, like post COVID, if you have to have your people in the office, like you have to stand over them, you're a bad manager. That's a tell for me. And that's an
Mhm.
opinion. I think that's a tell that if you feel like you have to stand over somebody to do work, then you probably don't know how to manage people. And
Or maybe they don't have the right employee in the job
could be, could
if they
could
feel
be,
that. Yeah.
but a good leader, Rhonda, will take that raw clay and train and invest and mentor and get that person to a place, or they'll get them to another place insofar as getting them to another place in the firm or letting them go. But a good leader will then try to not micromanage. They'll try to then think about the outcomes and go, okay, if you're a demand generation manager, you got to deliver to the firm 20,000 leads, a month. Okay, that's what you got to do. How you do that, okay, there's a lot of different ways. There's many paths to the outcome. And I think great managers, great leaders will back off of the how and let people kind of get to it.
Yeah. But you're right. We're right now seeing and seeing a high amount of stress. Um, and you're right. Like, gosh, we don't know the effect that this will have on our healthcare workers in another 6 months. Gosh, that's a storm waiting to happen.
It is.
But
It
but
is.
let's just talk about the employee that's working remote at home and there's stress involved. What are companies doing for these employees, or what are you seeing? Even some of the employees doing themselves.
I'm seeing some really remarkable things, Rhonda. I have to admit, I'm seeing companies, you know, basically become more flexible. And they recognize we're 2020 from the fires and famous people that have died to COVID to a recession to a presidential election in the U.S. Murder hornets, like this has been, and I had such high hopes for 2020. Really did. And this has been the year we'll look back in years from now and go, how did you make it through that year? How did you cope? And I've seen some really fascinating things with people that are doing wellness initiatives and well-being initiatives where they give their employees access to therapists and basically say, hey, listen, we're all doing therapy. you know it's not forced, it's not mandatory, but we all have access to it. And if you just want someone to talk to, great, take an hour, schedule a call, and just talk. And it could be nothing to do with work. It could be talking about your husband not pulling his weight, whatever, like whatever the bit is, because again, that home stress is work stress. The two are congealed. So I think that I've seen some fascinating things in onboarding. People really doing a great job of bringing in new employees and setting them up for success, like sending them a stand-up desk and a laptop that's already provisioned, and and lights because they're going to be on camera and things like that. Like they're thinking in advance of how they would have tooled up an employee for somebody at the office, and then thinking about, okay, well, they're in Topeka. How do we get them set up for success in Topeka? So what kind of Wi-Fi do they have? What can we do to help them there? So they're thinking. I mean, what I like, when I talk to practitioners, they're thinking well outside of the box, and it's really employee centric work. It's really thinking about each person instead of treating everybody the same, which has historically been a problem in HR. They're looking at the employee and saying, what do you need? Or, what do you need? You have 3 kids in diapers? Okay. First of all, sorry. Second, what 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 do you need to be successful? And I like that because it's looking at the individual's case and saying, we recognize that you're different and we want to help you. And we've got all kinds of different ways to help. So they've opened up the aperture of EAPs and all kinds of other things. That's where I've seen some of these other newer technologies that have kind of crept into the space, like student loan assistant program. Where maybe before we would have talked about that, but because of the recession, we have employees that are choking on student debt. Well, you know what? We have a program. We'll buy this technology. It'll help you manage that debt. And we'll do dollar for dollar, or we'll do some type of deal. And they're working with their employees to be successful. And it's the first time in my career that I've seen, we normally, I mean, again, December of 19, we would have dropped employees off at the deep end of the pool and said, hope you know how to swim. Here's onboarding, 6 hours. Here's your notebook. Great, get to work. That doesn't work today. And it hasn't worked through COVID. And I think, again, some of the silver linings of COVID is COVID's brought that empathy to HR and to talent acquisition that says you can't drop them off at the deep end of the pool. You shouldn't. I mean, not getting to the moral and ethical issue, you shouldn't, but you can't now.
Yeah.
Which is a different issue.
I'm in Canada, and right now, our government is discussing bringing on board universal childcare.
100%. Great.
We have universal health care, and
that's right.
They're saying
and good health care. It's not just universal. You actually have good health care to boot.
And the government is saying, and they just did some budget announcements recently, and I had to give credit. They talked about this pandemic being the she-demic. And lots of money has gone into women's programs.
Good. It's about time. It's only a couple of centuries late, but all right, yeah, good.
Exactly. But when you think
I'm glad it's finally happening in my lifetime.
But when you think of COVID, in the hospitality field, it was mainly women that lost their jobs.
That's right.
And women gave up their careers because of
that's right.
daycare, because of taking care of seniors, because homes were just a mess. Or just homeschooling, setting up homeschooling for their children. So there was a lot of women that stepped out of their careers.
Is disproportionate is one of the things that you think about, Rhonda. Is it affected women and has affected women, and lower income, and we could also deal with people of color in kind of a similar breath. It isn't equitable. It was never equitable. But COVID has also highlighted how the inequities were there.
That's right. It amplified it.
That's a great word. Yes, it amplified those inequities. And so I love when government can get in there and do something and say, we have a problem here. Corporations aren't going to fix this on their own. Nonprofits can't fix it on their own. We're going to step in and fix it. And I hope it works. And I hope it eventually makes it to the United States. I think it'd be wonderful.
It's in discussion right now.
Good.
So William, with Talent X, we're all about enjoying what you do and being good at what you do. And you excel with Recruiting Daily, and your brand is just so phenomenally strong. And it's because you're so positive in everything that you do. Um, what keeps William going, putting one step in front of the other every day?
Oh, good gosh. I think, and we talked about it pre-show. I think, I had three near-death experiences over a period of 22 months. And prior to that, I lived very fast. And I was kind of the next thing. What's the next thing? I'm here, but what's the next thing? What's next? And those three, if you take all three of those events and push them together, I learned to slow down and to enjoy every moment. And some of it's the ages of my kids. It's the ages or the age of myself and my marriage, and some of it's just like I've become even more at peace. I've always really been at peace with myself, but I've grown to become even more at peace at just being myself and letting people to either deal with it or not deal with it. And so I think one of the things that I've recognized is that COVID's taught me some things. Like I'm always learning things. That's what my grandfather actually kind of wove that into me. It's like you can learn something from every exchange. You can be in a elevator for 2 seconds or 20 seconds with a person, and you can learn something if you're aware. So I'm always learning, and I'm always trying to adapt. But I think the thing about being positive is it actually came from one of those near-death experiences. I almost got a tattoo on my hand. And it was because I kept having this dream that optimism is a choice. And that was this reoccurring dream that I had. And it is. You
I
wake
like
up
that.
every morning and you choose.
Hmm.
You choose. You can look outside and it can be cloudy, and you can choose, and I choose optimism. And I didn't grow up that way. I did. That wasn't the way. That wasn't me in my 20s or 30s, for sure. Not even in my 40s. But
Yeah.
optimism is a choice, and
Well,
so
William,
I choose optimism.
when I met you, you were a redneck Texan, you know, and the person I see today has mellowed so much.
Yep.
It's just hard to believe it's one and the same person.
I can still go to that gear if needed. I can go zero. I can go 0 to 80 if I have to, but I don't have to. I think that's one of the things, Rhonda, I finally have realized that I don't have to be that guy. I can be if needed, if required, but I don't have to be that guy. And I like that. And I think that's some of that's wisdom and age, and some of it's also, I do believe that those experiences really pushed me into kind of a reformat, kind of a mode where I have to look at my life and the way that I was living my life, but also the way that I was looking at relationships.
Right.
And so, I think, again, you are the sum of some of your experiences. And so
Mhm.
you've got to go through these experiences. You don't pop out of the womb with them. You gotta go through them and have them. And I'm glad
And
I
like,
have.
and like you said, you have to learn from them.
Yep. Well,
Yeah.
and some people don't, Rhonda, as you well know. Some people will have some people will have those experiences and then not learn anything from them. So you got to be open. You got to be open. It's like, I think I was 36 when I realized this, that you can't change somebody. So like when, dealing with like some of the addictions, right? If somebody's addicted to alcohol and you're around them, and you can try everything. You can hope, you can pray, you can try, you can do everything, but unless that person wants to change, they're not going to change. And so recognizing that in yourself and recognizing that you can still try and pray and do all those things, but the real change won't happen unless they want it to happen. Then that's all of us. And that's not just addictions, that's pretty much everything in life. It's up to you as an individual. If you want to choose optimism, you choose that. If you don't want to be addicted to alcohol, you can actually, I don't know if you ever get off or get away from being an alcoholic, but you can transfer your alcoholism to another addiction, like,
To
working
another
out,
energy. Yeah.
to another energy. That's
Yeah,
right. I've
exactly.
seen a lot of people do that.
Yeah. And I think, if it was one of the things that I was taught, William, as a coach, the 10 most powerful 2-letter words in the English vocabulary. If it is to be, it is up to me.
Whew. Oh, that's good. That's
Yeah.
really good. Well, and again, I mean, I think that's true of like just a lot of things in life. I've got Henry's in 9th grade and Van Ellis is in 5th, and so right now they're both kind of discovering grades in different ways, right? And so it's like, with Henry, I'm having more adult conversations like, listen, grades are just a way to create options. That's all it is. It's a game. Whether or not the topic is biology or history, it doesn't really matter. It's a game. You play the game. And then the game is to get the A. That's how you know that you've achieved the game. You just play the game, you get the A. Well, why do you get the A's? Well, you get all A's so that at the end of your high school career, you've maximized your options. That's all it is. You can then at that point do what you want. But if you don't have all A's, let's say you're a C student, your options are less. But that's a choice. And it doesn't come like, this is one of the things with this generation, both my boys are Gen Z, is teaching them that nothing's given to you. Like if you want something, just like you said, you got to go and get it. You got to go and work for it. You got to go and earn it. In fact, Henry and I talked this morning about a biology thing, and he said, I want her to give me, this, that, and the other. I said, you need to stop saying give. Take that word out of your vernacular. Take it out of your lexicon. There is no give. You earn. You go earn that A in biology. She's not going to give you anything. You earn it. So it's, again, that's something in my 30s I wouldn't have thought like that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I love that phrase. If it's to be, it's up to me. Is that correct?
Yeah. If it is to be, it is up to me.
Oh, I love that. Well
Yeah.
done. That's a good one.
Thank you, William. And this is Rhonda Taylor from Talent X with my guest. Thank you ever so much, William Tincup. It's always a pleasure to connect with you. And I say goodbye to everyone and stay safe. And as the saying is these days, test negative, stay positive.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Talent X podcast.
For more talent experience and future of work conversations, visit talentxpodcast.com.
Follow us on Twitter at TalentXPodcast.
Or join the conversation with #TalentXPodcast on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter.
Talent X, the Talent Experience podcast, was brought to you by the fabulous Fuelies at Fuel 50.